Well, hello, and this week we have the fabulous Nigel May joining us, along with Alistair as well, who's also equally fabulous, I have to
Oh,
say.
thanks.
So, hello, Nigel. Lovely to
Hey
see
Kim,
you.
hey Alistair. It's a pleasure to be here. Very happy
Now,
to talk all things Sewing Bee, as you well know.
now, obviously, we've known you for a long, long time. Well, we'll not say too long. But for the people who've never met you before, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I knew Alistair when he was clean shaven. Hello, the beard. I'm loving. And the same for you, Kim, obviously. I have known you guys for a long, long time because obviously I've worked on Craft Telly as a host for about 20 years, spent a long time on Creating Craft, and then last year started at Hobby Maker, which is where I currently am. So I love doing that, bringing lots of, fabulous crafts, including soft craft to the world, which is great. I also work for a radio station. I volunteer for a radio station called Gadio. So I do a couple of shows there, interviewing all sorts of lovely people and celebrities and people from the Sewing Bee in the past as well. So always good. I host a podcast called A Gay Old Time, where I interview LGBTQIA celebrities about their lives and their trials and tribulations and their journey so far, which I love because I'm nosy and I like interviewing people. And I write books as well. I've written 8 books so far that are out there on Amazon, including a cozy, crafty crime, which is one of my faves, Quilling Me Softly. And yeah, I keep myself busy. I spin a lot of plates, guys, but it's always nice to see some very old, lovely faces. Old as in, I've known you a long time, not as in old as we're not looking good, because we are.
So we can still get your book, Quilling Me Softly, so I can pop a link on.
Oh, please do. That would be lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. You can get it on paperback. You can get it on e-reader. Hang on. If I'm going to do this.
Show us the cover.
There you go, Quilling Me. It's a thick old read. I think that's
Yeah.
because it's got quite big print, but there you go. But yes, it's a cozy crime based around a craft group. There's a murder in the village, and it's up to the 2 ladies that run the craft group to try and solve what's gone on. They're swapping clues for glues and deception for decoupage. That's what's going on.
Excellent.
And also, there's a pub named after
Oh my gosh, yes, of course. The pub in there
brand
is
called Sixpenny Memories. I mean, I'm sure I'm referenced in it somehow, but it's
You are. Do you know, I'll be honest, I haven't looked at the book for about a year because it came out at the start of 2023. So yes, the pub in there is called the Sixpenny Pub? Sixpenny. God, that's awful. I can't remember the Sixpenny Tavern or whatever it's called, named after your lovely company, Kim. And yes, I think there's an Alistair that pops in there as well. In fact, I'm sure there is. Why would I not have somebody so dashing and debonair in my book? I mean, come on.
Oh, okay, flattery. Get 10 points for that. But I'll skim
Scoring
read it
well.
again.
Scoring well, please do. Tell the world.
So we're here to talk about this week's Sewing Bee episode, which was all about lingerie. Now, the first challenge that they had, if you notice that, well, the first thing I noticed was that it given them 4.25 hours to do this pattern challenge, which was quite unusual amount of time. Well, it's quite a long time actually. In the past, that's been the equivalent time to do the last project. But this time they had to do a pajama style blouse with piping. And oh my goodness gracious me, I think the piping was one of the issues. Nigel, I'm going to come straight to you to say what you thought about that particular project, or was there any standout moments for you?
Well, first of all, I've got to say, seeing as it was lingerie week, I think I'm pretty disappointed in all 3 of us that we didn't turn up for this in lingerie. We could have done that. We could have had our gym jams on. We could have worn, we could have had a little fleecy negligee or something on, couldn't we? It would have been perfect. But no, I agree with you. I thought 4.25 hours. I thought, blimey, that's a long old time. I mean, luckily we don't get to sit there and have to watch 4.25 hours of it. But yeah, it did seem a long, long time given the nature of the transformation. But yes, you're right. The piping caused all sorts of concern, didn't it? I mean, Marcus was like, "Oh, my piping's disappeared," and other people were like, "Well, my piping is wonky," and it's like, it just didn't look good. I have no idea how difficult it is to put piping on a garment, but I'm gathering that it's probably very, very difficult because they all seem to pretty much. I mean, apart from Pasha and Alex, they all seem to pretty much struggle with it, didn't they?
Mm-hmm. Alistair, I mean, I would be considering using interlinings or interfacing tapes, which are all available on the House of Alistair website. And certainly the feet of on their sewing machines, I think if they'd used either a piping foot or an adjustable zipper foot, they might have got a better result. But listen, let's go to your fashion tips and from the couturier world. Where did they all go sadly wrong or make it very difficult for themselves?
Well, I wrote down, so I was a bit sort of when they said they were going to make a pajama top for lingerie week, I thought, is that kind of lingerie kind of thing? And I thought, well, the fabrics they're using is fine, but I would have liked to have seen this week a lot more sort of like things like lace work and things like that, to see how they handled putting very sheer fabrics and that together. But so for instance, like the piping, of course, when they said piping, I thought it was going to be a corded piping. And I thought, oh, well, actually, that's actually quite difficult to master. If anyone's ever tried to just pipe a simple cushion and you start struggling where it comes around the curve, and you start to make, in the pattern, you start to make the curve even bigger so it eases itself in, rather than trying to get one of those. But there's several things that you can actually do. So for instance, this was flat piping. So flat piping is cut on the bias. And as long as your piping, for instance, is equal all the way round, when you offer the raw edges of the piping up to the raw edge of the actual collar, it should uniformly pop out the other side once it's taken its seam allowance off. One thing that you can do when you get to the corners, if you slightly clip into the actual corner and just baste around the corner the piping in. Now, you're putting what we call a convex into sort of like a concave area. So that just means you're putting an upside down smiley face into a smiley face kind of thing. So you're putting two opposing curves together, which is quite difficult. So fair play to them for doing that. What you can do is you can place that piping around the collar first. You can baste it in. You can flip it over to make sure that you're happy with it. Sew that in first, and then offer up the under collar, and then you would baste it in, but obviously with time, just pin it and then offer that in. Always, when you're doing something like that, pull the work through and push it out before you press it, because it's that satin fabric, and as soon as you put an iron and you don't use an ironing cloth, every shine will start coming up, and you'll get indentation of the seam allowance as well with that one. A cushion board is also really, really good for that. But once you offer it up and you can see that it's actually done, then you can rectify any like little mistakes, which are actually quite easy to do. And also make sure you use a large stitch when you're sewing. So on a domestic machine, I would say I would use between a 3.5 and 4 length stitch. I wouldn't go to 5 because those are ginormous on domestic machines. I always use a size 4, just in case you have to unpick something. You're not trying to unpick teeny weeny stitches. Plus also that larger stitch, when you're trying to ease the piping out to place it.
What is going on?
Why have I got fireworks in the back?
I have no idea what happened.
I enjoyed it though. I want some now.
Very good, yeah.
Oh well, that's just I just thought I would try and outdo myself.
You bring your own sparkle. I love it.
But anyway, that's what I would have done. But flat piping is slightly easier to put into a garment, especially if you're offering it into a placket, because essentially it's a flat piece of fabric, but it is cut on the bias. Anyone that doesn't know what bias means, you've got your where you weave a fabric, you've got the warp and the weft, which run horizontally and vertically. Horizontal.
Yeah, horizontal and vertical.
Vertically. But what you want to do is to cut it on the bias. It makes any fabric stretchy, so you cut it on the diagonal. So when you actually pull it, it will make any silk stretchy. So yeah, I thought it was actually quite a difficult. I thought it was actually quite a difficult thing. I would have thought if they'd asked them to make a pair of French knickers, but incorporate some really intricate lace or something like that, I thought that would have been maybe a more a more say doable sort of like project, because the buttonholes as well on that fabric. And again, please, once you've create the buttonholes first and offer that up to the under placket, and then mark where your buttons are, because it doesn't matter if you follow a pattern. Your machine might make them slightly bigger, might put them 2 millimeters to the top, to the bottom, to the left, to the right. It will give the, well, if you do it that way and offer them up and then mark your buttons, then your garment that you've created the buttonholes will lie flat.
I was actually thinking about that, because we've suggested, or you've suggested that previously, when Susie, our bottom buttonhole, she'd put it in the wrong place. And I thought, if you'd only listened to, or had the opportunity, because obviously this is filmed a while ago, to listen to what Alistair had said, then you wouldn't have had that problem, because that's what skewed her whole front of her blouse. The other thing, again, it goes back to the pattern. People have, I've been looking on social media, and people are saying that the patterns in the books that the Sewing Bee are selling are not correct, and they actually are questioning, because for all of the contestants to have similar issues with regards to the construction, and this is a pattern challenge, that there must be some blips in that pattern. So I think answering the social media comments, possibly the person who's proofreading them is proofreading them so they're grammatically correct, but maybe not sewing with them and following those stages. So yeah. So with regards to the actual finished garments, the overall, Nigel, was the one that stood out for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Pasha and Alex, I mean, deserved the sort of top placing for the pajama round. But I've got to ask you guys, because obviously you guys watch it with a very kind of like critical, techniquey eye. I watch it in a purely like, oh, what were they thinking with that fabric kind of eye. Marcus, obviously it was going to do this like muddy coloured piping to begin with, and I was just sat there thinking, that's ugly, that doesn't look very nice. And then I think it was Luke that popped up and said, you should change that, and he went with the white piping in the end, which looked a lot better. I know it wasn't beautifully executed, but it did look better. I don't understand what goes through people's minds sometimes when they're picking things. I mean, you know, I'm not the biggest fashionista in the world, but I do think Marcus, you know, from some of his previous outfits, has had a really good eye for like things and how they go together. But that muddy piping was rotten, wasn't it? I don't know what he was thinking. So I'm glad he sorted it out in the end. But yeah, that one stood out for me at the beginning for just being like a bad choice.
Yeah. The other thing though, it was, I think it was Alex. Patrick commented specifically about her. She had like a burnt orange, and he said, "Oh," and he questioned it. However, when it was actually in the finished garment, it worked. So sometimes I think it's a difficult one, because fabrics and colour choices are all very, very personal, and this has been one of the themes that's ran through the criticism, that sometimes the critique by the judges is more often colour related, which is very personal, rather than the execution of the garment or the sewing or the techniques that's been done. So whilst he picked that muddy colour, which I agree wasn't quite right, maybe in his head, a bit like Alex was thinking, I know this is going to work. And sometimes you've got to clash, haven't you? It is a difficult one, and they have to work with what they have. And also it appeared that there was only the one bolt of white, because he actually then borrowed it from Luke. So on a previous one, when somebody's had to rethink their fabrics and there's only been the one bolt available, that actually caused them to have a major problem with their time management, because they had to wait for one to be cut out before they could get the fabric. So I think possibly that was what was left out of that selection, and he's grabbed what he thought, would work. It'd be interesting to ask him.
I think this actually goes back to the thing when we look at, because obviously this is actually done by the same production company that we all know as Love Productions, and it's the same as the Bake Off. So for instance, when they do these technical challenges, the Bake Off has it nailed, because everybody gets the same ingredients, the same amount of ingredients, they get the same recipe, but it's all about the execution of how they've followed the recipe with the pre-given thing. What they should have done is they should have given everyone, say, red satin with white piping, and then you should have seen all of the same color that was put on parade, if you like, and then they should critique the sewing. So let Esme and Patrick choose their favorite colors, let them go to town on that. They can choose the color for them, but give them all, I don't know, 1.5 meters of red satin and a 0.5 meter worth of white satin, and they all produce a red pajama top with white piping, and then it's an even keel. Because, for instance, if you were to choose, for instance, a patterned fabric to make the piping out of, that actually might look at, you might not have put it in perfectly, but it hides a multitude of sins. So you can be quite clever if you really want to be. So it actually looks visually more stunning than it actually is. But I just think to constantly be critiquing their color choices, which goes, you see, I'm a designer, so whenever I had to go to Paris to go to the big exhibitions, so for instance, in the fashion industry, we actually predict the colors 4 years in advance to it hitting the store. So we're actually working 4 years prior. Now, the yarn dyers and actual dye companies, they're working 2-3 years before us. So in actual fact, what you actually see in the stores has almost taken 10 years to almost like get there. My job as a designer is to look at all the color palettes that Pantone are releasing, but I've got to look at all of them, and my brain has to work in a certain way where I pick the key color. They don't tell you necessarily what the key color is or the key grouping, but my brain, with everything that's going on in society and economics and everything like that, I've got to pick the right one. If it's a fashion house, if you home in the wrong color group, that can be you over in a season.
It is a hard one. And the other thing is, it is called a pattern challenge, not a pattern and pick the best color fabrics that go together. Right. So, you know, if we are comparing it with the Bake Off, it would be an even playing field, but we've talked about that before. So I'm going to move swiftly on to the transformation challenge, where they were given 2 pieces of body shape wear, which, bless Mark, I don't think even realised what it was, and then up to 2 meters of lace. Now, they did bring some lace into this. The handling of it, Alistair, was not necessarily what we would have or would have wanted to see, because with the transformation challenge, they're only given an hour and a half. And when Esme at the end comes and says, oh, I wish they'd done a bit more and I wish they'd done this, they had an hour and a half from picking to producing. So I'm going to come to, I will go to Nigel. Did you have a favourite one on that one, or the controversial one, or the one that was off the wall?
I think for the transformation challenge, I'll be honest, it wasn't my favourite. I mean, as a sort of whole, like looking at all of the end garments, I was a bit underwhelmed. But there are 2 that do stick out straight away for me. One, of course, is Marcus with his, like, you know, abs and pec little sort of superhero creation, which I kind of thought was brilliant in the fact that it was completely different to everything else. I mean, the whole point of that challenge is to transform something into something that is completely unrecognizable from what it was to begin with. And I think he did that incredibly well. Yes, it could have done with some armholes, because it kind of was just a piece of fabric with some like bumpy pecs and abs on, which was fun. And, you know, I'd quite happily wear that to Pride, but it's like, I just thought it didn't really fulfill the brief of being a garment, did it? Which I know Esme and Patrick picked up upon. But that stood out. And I mean, Marcus sometimes I think flies under the radar, but I do think for that one, he really did stand out, as it were. The other one, Susie. Now, I love Susie. I think Susie should have her own TV show anyway, because it's like her fashion I love week after week after week. Just what she walks into that studio wearing, I love. She's, you know, she dances to the beat of her own drum. She's completely unique. I know she has her little sort of moments of insecurity when she thinks things go a little bit shambolic and wrong, which I think as a viewer, with my viewer head on, makes me love her even more. But her transformation, I just thought it was, I don't know, it was kind of a little bit sort of Mad Max warrior, kind of princess. You know, all of these like bits laced together or held together with like straps and bits and pieces, and those two tiniest cups that would not hold any kind of chest in, quite frankly, would they? So I just think her outfit to me just looked a bit basic, for want of a nicer word. But yeah, it just seemed a bit basic, a bit costumey, and just not very, as in not very exciting, given that I thought, you know, if you are going to do some kind of like warrior princess, whatever the theme was behind it, or the idea behind it, it wasn't executed very well. It just looked a bit thrown together for me. But then it may have been beautifully executed with the sewing, I don't know. But as a garment to look at, I just thought, what's that? But those are the two that stand out, though, which is ironic, isn't it? Because I know obviously neither of those. I mean, Malcolm became last on that one, and I think Susie was fifth, wasn't she? So
Yeah, yeah.
it's like those two are the ones that stood out for all the wrong reasons for me. But it's nice with your view ahead on to see different things. If they'd have all been immaculate, it would have been very, very dull and boring.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that I did burst out laughing was when Esme said, that's not very wearable. Well, I'm sorry. If I look over all of the transformation challenges over the various seasons that we've had, 10 seasons, I think there's probably not very many of them, if at all, that are actually wearable garments. So I did burst out laughing last night. Alistair, what was your take on the transformation challenge?
Right, I'm not a fan of the transformation challenge at all. And to be honest, shapewear, why bother? It was a sea of nudes and chocolates and flesh tones and what have you. That's why we don't take pure black on television, because it doesn't translate. Yeah, it might be a useful fabric, but I don't come on and take 16 different variations, maybe some of a sparkle all in black, because when you're watching it on TV, it's boring. And this was really, the producers and what have you, they really need to they need to dig a bit deeper. If, in my opinion, if they had, for instance, Patrick's constantly going on about reuse, recycle, all this kind of thing. That's his mantra. Why didn't they? Because go and get a whole load of old underwear, like old bras and things like that, which in actual fact, they're only taken by certain charities to actually be shipped off to places like Africa, where they can be reused. But charity shops here in the UK will not take underwear. So if they're giving them like a whole load of bras and stuff like that, for me, that would have been far more interesting to see how they would put all the bras together or something like that. And they would have had lots of different colors and what have you, have their own sort of like weird science kind of like moment. But I just thought even the lace was in flesh tones. Flesh tones are the hardest color in the fashion industry to actually sell. And unless you've got really dark skin or lovely, olive or black skin, they're the only color groupings that can get away with these types of flesh tones, because their skin, it radiates on them. Whereas if I put that on, it would make me look more like a milk bottle than I ever have. So I just wasn't a fan. I actually thought Marcus's take on it, in actual fact, it is a garment because it technically was an elongated boob tube.
Yeah.
So in actual fact, it didn't need armholes, Esme. And also Esme's comment to Luke's. Now, Luke's actually, I thought, was a little bit, it was actually quite coherent in terms of, it had the neckline that came, it had the drape of the thing. It was sort of thought out as in terms of a kind of a wearable garment. And it had, the lace was actually placed. When Esme said it could have done with more, I'm like, have you just seen what else you've just critiqued? It's like you've got, Susie's all the cut up bits. That was sort of like some sort of like take from some random sort of like space age sort of Barbarella sort of like film where they were, stuck in a desert somewhere, like Mad Max kind of sort of thing. None of them were wearable. None of them are wearable pretty much when you see them, because they're given a whole load of like stuff. And like when they did the big reveal as to what they were doing, shapewear, it's like on Nigel in, well, actually, Kim, when RuPaul, right, does her, the sewing challenge on Drag Race, and even RuPaul says it's just a leotard with a load of stuff glue gunned to it. That's not sewing. They would have been better off handing them each a glue gun and a bucket of sequins for this challenge. That is basically what they should have done. That might have been more interesting with the burns.
You know, we sit at home thinking of new things to create and make, and I'm the world's worst. It takes me absolutely hours. But can you imagine getting so far down that transformation? So that might have been Susie and thinking, this isn't going to work. But
Yeah.
I've used most of my time. She hasn't got. So you have to go with that, even though you know this isn't going to work. Whereas at home, you can go, that hasn't worked. We have to start again, or we'll have to adapt. Bless them. I just, my heart goes out to them when they're given sometimes a load of stuff. And I was so uninspired when they revealed the shapewear. I thought, my goodness gracious me, they need help.
But this is where credit is due to Susie, isn't it? Because her outfit was, I think, the most memorable, apart from the abs and pecs, which was in a whole different ballpark.
Yeah.
But I think Susie's was the most memorable. It's like when you said about Luke's then, I love Luke. I think Luke is really creative from week to week to week. I'd actually forgotten what he did in the transformation, because to me, I think all of the outfits kind of ended up looking like some soft rock album cover from the 1980s or something, or some, I don't know, Bucks Fizz video from like the early 80s where they were all dressed up in like lace and stuff. It just felt a bit kind of, they all seemed a bit samey to me as a viewer. But Susie's, yes. I mean, even though it wasn't particularly well executed as far as the breast cups were concerned, and the finished look, and the skirt bit kind of did just look like it was tacked on, and all of that. I don't know. It looked a bit thrown together, but at least there was imagination there. And I'm not saying the others didn't have imagination; they did. But I think the end result was a lot more imaginative and a lot more memorable to, you know, layman's eyes like me. When you compare all 6 of the finished outfits, I agree it wasn't the most exciting transformation challenge, but I don't know. Lace isn't that. Can you really be creative and do lots of like different kind of things with lace and shapewear? I don't know, but it just didn't. Yeah, it wasn't one of the best weeks as far as transformation is concerned, was it?
But I do believe in years to come, we'll all remember the abs and the pecs.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know, certain things will be iconic. It's like, to use like a RuPaul thing again, it's like when somebody comes down the catwalk in the worst outfit ever, you know, made of paper bags or whatever, you kind of think, oh my God, that's awful. Yes, it gets, you know, ripped to shreds with the critique there and then, but it's the one that you remember. It becomes kind of like iconic afterwards. And I think, yeah, that outfit will probably be one of the most memorable outfits from this season of Sewing Bee, even though, you know, it wasn't the best.
So before we move on to the final challenge, every week we do have a giveaway. And this week's winner is Bernadette Dillon, who left a comment on our YouTube, or the House of Alistair YouTube channel, which is where this goes out. So congratulations, Bernadette. I'll pop in the email address for you to email me, and we will send out the prize. Now, this week, House of Alistair has another prize, haven't you? Because I know I've seen it.
I know.
One.
I thought long and hard about this one.
You got shapewear.
Yeah, shapewear. I didn't actually have any, and I didn't think anybody would want any of my cast-offs. I mean, I know that you and Nigel both have, you know, things that you could have dug out from days of C&A and stuff like that in Littlewoods, but, you know, anyway.
Chelsea girl, back in the day, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not letting go any of my La Perla, that's for sure. But literally, what I've got for everybody. So this is a really big fat quarter pack. So you're actually getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're getting 6 fat quarters in here. Now these are blenders, but these are lovely springy, summery sort of slight autumnal colours. So you're getting those, and you're also getting 20, one of our bags, bobbin bags, which has got 20 spools in of mixed different colours of threads. So that's a really nice little bundle to get.
Brilliant. So if anybody wants to be in the chance for winning that, all you have to do is leave a comment in the YouTube. What I will say is that we have had some amazing comments and a lot of comments. A lot of people are really enjoying the Sewing Bee Natter, which is just fantastic. Thank you so much for liking and sharing it. They're enjoying it as much as the programme. So I'm really pleased. And if people want to send in comments, I'll leave my email address as well. So if you want to ask questions for future guests, we're getting near the end. But if you want to ask questions, then please don't hesitate to do so. So Sorry,
Also, I
Nigel.
will say as well, if you want, I'm quite happy to give away a copy of this as well. If you want to add that
Oh,
to the prize draw, if you want to add that to
oh,
the mix, it's like when we find out who wins, if they want it signed, they can have it signed. If they don't want it signed, I won't sign it. Whatever you fancy. But yeah, if you
thank
want
you
a
so
copy of
much.
that as well, like one of the paperbacks, I will get that to you as well. That can go into the prize pot.
That's so
That's great.
generous. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Spread the
Brilliant.
word.
Oh, we got an extra boozy bonus this week.
That's exactly, yes.
Well, you're
So
very welcome.
So we're going to move on to the final challenge, which is the one that they normally have the longer amount of time. I think it was 5 hours this time.
It was, yeah.
And it was a bustier dress. Now, I'm going to come straight to you, Alice, because I want you in the fashion industry. Obviously, the corset and that style goes back many years, and then we lost the boning. There was a huge conversation about boning. So could we quickly talk about that? And the other thing, which actually was in the dressmaking challenge, was the crinoline tape. I forgot to ask you about that as well. So if we talk about the crinoline tape first, when would you use it and what effect would it give?
So crinoline tape is essentially, the easiest way to describe it is it's a bit like a dress net that's actually woven in a tube. So when you cut it, the raw edges on this the tape edge, if you like. So it's usually comes in different widths. What you can do is you can add that into a hem of a skirt. So say, for instance, you're doing a 1950s skirt and you wanted some extra puff, but you don't want to put a full petticoat underneath. You want a sort of a where it will sort of fit at the top, and then it'll flare down, and then it'll become more voluminous around the sides.
Yeah.
So you would add that into the hem. You can get it around about 4 inches. Sometimes you can get it even wider, but the general ones are around about 2.5 to 3 inches wide. You can get it in all sorts of different colors. It's cheap as chips, so it's not a highly expensive thing. So if you want to have a play at home with it, just go online or go to your local haberdashery shop and just see. Some people don't have it. They also use it in millinery as well, to create shapes and stuff like that. So it's a great form. It's like a really soft, light version of a boning. It gives it creates waves in when you insert it into fabric. So you can put that into the cuff of a sleeve if you wanted to. I've actually used crinoline actually into armholes. So if you've got, say, not like a full-on mutton sleeve, but if you've got something that needs the sleeve, you've got a very pronounced sleeve. For instance, when Luke did his 1980s version with his mum's, I think it was his mum's wedding dress.
Yeah.
That just needed a bit of dress net or crinoline, if you like, inserted inside, and that would have given you the volume without having to put wadding inside it. It's not heavy, so it's great. It's lightweight. It's actually quite a little hero product, actually. You should all go and give it a go. And if you want to practice it, make a little girl's dress, and then you just don't have the whole volume of trying to do a big girl's dress with a 4.5-meter hem that you have to do. So do something a little bit small. It's a really fantastic product to use, especially on lightweight fabrics. If you're using chiffon, it's actually quite interesting to put that into it to actually see to create the volume, because chiffon will just fall and hang. It does not have any shape. When it moves and you twirl round, it takes flight. But if you want it to have a bit of flight in your downtime areas, then you put a bit of crinoline in.
Brilliant. Now the boning, which was used a lot in the last challenge, one of the contestants used cable ties. Question, why?
That was Susie, wasn't it?
Susie used cable ties.
Yeah, again,
Why
I mean, I love the fact, maybe it wasn't a wise choice, but I love the fact that she tries to always think outside the box. That's what I love about her. She is so interesting. It may not always be the most wise, interesting choice, but it's always an interesting choice.
So with your boning, there was two, it seemed to appear that they used two techniques. One was to create the channel, and the other one was, well, certainly Alex laid hers on the top. So will you just briefly tell us a little bit about boning and any tips that you've got with regards to that?
Right. My biggest tip with boning, doesn't matter whether you're using plastic boning, steel spiral boning, any of the above, is don't necessarily put. I know a lot of patterns ask you to, especially with the plastic one, you can sew through it. I'm not a fan of sew through plastic boning because you'll never really cut it exactly where it needs to be. So when you're trying to hem, say, a bustier, some of the boning might be a little bit too tall, but you've sewn it in. Whereas if you create a channel, you're able to adjust your boning by snipping a tiny little bit back off it. I always create, whenever I'm doing corsetry for a big bridal gown, because the corsets I produce are as beautiful as the wedding. You don't see them, but they're beautifully embroidered as well when you get them inside, because some of the stay stitches you use on a corset are so beautiful. And when you use a contrasting stitch, that keeps all the boning inside. Plus also, if you use channels, so like pockets, long pockets, if you like, to put your boning into, that allows you to actually work with the corset. Now, corsets or bustiers, you saw all the contestants with really odd shaped pattern pieces. So essentially, in those shaped pattern pieces, they're like large darts, but they've been cut out into the seam. So when you put those together, when you hold it up, especially I think when I think it was Marcus that held his up, that was like a proper corset kind of thing, if you like. When he held his up, it was almost like a sculpture. It was all in sort of like different directions. So that's because when it fits around the body, it's very narrow at the waist. And then it has to come back up to the bust area, and it has to go back out at the hip area. So you're creating this hourglass sort of like illusion with it. So having channels, sewing channels in, the last thing that you actually do is you attach bias binding all the way around the top and the bottom if it's to be visible, or it's an undergarment. Then you can insert the boning. You attach one, like the top edge of the bias, you fix that in place. Then from the bottom, because it's in a channel, you push the boning up ever so slightly, and then you sew the bottom part so that you're not actually going to break a needle and you're not actually going to interfere with the actual bone. I'm not a fan of sewing boning because sewing boning, when it's on, unlike steel boning, when it's on a coil, you can make that boning straight again. Where when it's plastic, even if you try and press it or iron it, you very seldom can't actually get it straight again. So that's when Marcus was going like, oh, the corset was almost like it was like a big tongue coming up at the thing. That's because it's plastic boning and it has a mind of its own. If you had done it to, if the boning is going like that, if you flip it over so it's going like that and sew that part onto the garment, you're already forcing it to be flatter than it would be.
Excellent. Oh, thank you. So Nigel, did you have a standout garment at the end for this particular challenge?
What, for the boning challenge, or for
the actual finished garment? I mean, they all were slightly different.
Okay, so my favourite of the end ones was Susie's. I mean, I loved Susie's. I love her colour palette again. Just the way that she put that dress together. I know she didn't get the pockets on it, so she was a bit kind of like, oh, it didn't quite get it finished. Again, time management, not the best. But I really like that garment. But I'm looking at that in a kind of like, if I was a woman, which one would I want to wear? It's like literally, well, I'd be quite happy to wear them anyway. But it's like, I did think, yeah, that garment was particularly lovely. I mean, I loved Luke's dress as well. I mean, I know he had a bit of a problem with the pleats on the bust area. They weren't, Esme was quite critical about, they weren't all evenly spaced and evenly sized. They weren't uniform. But again, that's one that stands out to me. I thought it was quite memorable. I thought it was very stylish. So those are the two that first come to mind for me. I mean, I like, again with Marcus. I mean, I think Marcus does make memorable stuff. I mean, I loved, what was his description? He wanted to create something that, well, I know, somebody going to a Chemical Romance concert, wasn't it?
Yes.
It's like you wanted something that was very, very, very different. And I liked the whole kind of like 80s, again, kind of like a sort of Top of the Pops extra from the 1980s, one of those people in one of those dancing groups back in the day. It kind of gave me those kind of vibes, which I loved in a nostalgic kind of way. I mean, I know fashion goes right the way round, so it may be very current here in 2024, but for me, those three were probably the ones that stood out, and yet none of those were the winners, were they?
That's right. Yes. What about you, Alistair?
I sort of Pasha's, I thought, going back to Asma's when, because obviously Asma won, and she did she was an ace at the lingerie and the cups and everything like that. I thought Pasha's was very beautifully executed. And the play, she took great care on that lace placement, like ultra care. So she was very, very calm and what have you, and it looked really lovely. Even the hem was beautifully finished, everything like that. I liked Luke's. I saw where he was going with that. I mean, Esme's comment about the fact that the bustier was sort of like, you know, coming away. Well, that sort of like, if you like that, the flap that comes up, that is actually supposed to be almost like a mandarin collar. It's not supposed to sit flat against the body to give extra dimension. And just a note, if you are slightly not as well endowed as your mates and what have you, and you want to appear to have a bigger chest, that is the shape that will make you look as if you've got bigger boobs. The other ones that I didn't sort of like, Elsa's, I mean, it didn't even fit. I mean, I don't know what was going on, but she's almost taken like 6 steps back ever so slightly. I mean, we've got to appreciate this is the way that it's been edited.
Of course.
But I don't know whether or not Elsa was getting in her head this week or what was going on. But for the time management and what she was doing, it was just, I think once she had created it, because they were all doing all the measurements and stuff like that. I mean, that was a pretty big thing. I mean, it didn't meet. It was about 3-inch gap at the top. I mean, that's not teeny weeny. That's really significant. She would have been better off if she had done a lace up back. No one would have been none the wiser. They would have just thought that was a detail. And then you could have added a placket on the back, quick fix, so you saw it as a detail. So she could have done that rather than it having to actually meet. I thought Marcus's was really good fun. I actually really did think it was fun. I loved the plum tartan that went all the way around. I thought it was kind of quirky and cool, and I thought that, you know, some of the younger kids watching it, rather than it being, say, like an evening gown kind of thing or a prom dress, that would relate to, you know, kids wanting to be a bit gothy or different or alternative. So I thought that was I really liked that. The execution, not so much, especially in the thing. But fair play to him, putting all that volume of, you know, tartan that is not easy at all, because that is quite thick. Susie's, I really liked the sort of like the homage to Paco Rabanne and Yves Saint Laurent with the color blocking. And I really found that Susie's this time was a little bit more controlled, and she actually did get the garment seemed to be sort of like finished. So I think because now there's fewer of them, I think the pressure's maybe slightly off a little bit, as we've seen in previous seasons. The camaraderie seems to be coming in a little bit more. Alex's, I did think it was lovely, but I didn't really see I think she gave herself too much work for not very much reward, in terms of, because it was black on black, you either has to sparkle or something like that. And what I mean by that is like Swarovskis or something like that, so actual sparkles. It was just because you're putting black on black, details get lost very you'd chosen maybe's red and be a bit daring, then all of her hard work and details would have shone and shown up. But because it was black on black, those teeny weeny little details, unless you're in a high-end store and they're pointing all the lovely details out for you to give them £8,000 for the dress that you're about to try on, then literally, it wouldn't have it didn't translate for the for the work that went in, but she had a few problems with the dress on it. Yeah, I thought Pasha's, I thought because of the time she'd taken with all that lace, and she was making sure that the cups were really nice. I thought, yeah, so that was I think my favorite one.
So obviously when it came to people going home, garment of the week this week was Pasha's, which I think we'll probably all agree was the right garment of the week. But did you agree with the decision as to who went home, Nigel?
Did I agree with the decision? I mean, I think it was clear it was going to be either Elsa or, I know Luke was in contention initially, which did set a ripple of fear through me. I was like, no, because I do want Luke to be there to the end because I just think he's sensational. Was it Marcus's time to go? I mean, yes, I'll be honest, out of the ones that were in possible contention, Elsa, Susie and Marcus, I am glad personally that Marcus went, just because I prefer watching the other two. As far as whether he deserved to go on the quality of what he produced this week, Lacey, abs and pecs aside, I don't know whether it was the right decision. I think if we look at his body of work since the beginning, then maybe, yes, it was the right time to go. I mean, Susie, for me, I still feel there's so much more to see with Susie. It's like, I'm really pleased for Marcus that he managed to get to this week and produce his favourite design, because that's what he wanted to. He said, if I can get to week 7 and produce my favourite design, then job done, I'm going out on a high. So I think there was a lovely kind of like happy ever after ending on that front. It's difficult because I think at this stage of the Sewing Bee, you do, I mean, however many weeks we're in, 7 weeks in now, you get invested in these people. You do enjoy watching them week by week. And I think, it is quite a tight-knit group, isn't it? And I think it's very sad when anybody goes. But, as Marcus said, he'd run out of caps, so maybe it was time to go.
What about you, Alistair? Caps aside.
It's kind of an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's like you actually see what is produced and you think, right, okay, so it's all about this week isolated. So it's about what they do this week, but it's not really what they do this week, because like Elsa, it's a fitting challenge, and none of it, the skirt wasn't attached to the actual bustier top, and it was a dress that they actually asked for. So in actual fact, it didn't actually, it didn't fit. It was non-functionable. If she had maybe a smaller model, maybe it's a size 0, then it might have actually fitted. But in actual fact, that was catastrophic. That did not fit at all. It didn't even close. So, but then again, was it time for maybe Marcus to go? He has been a bit off the wall, and for instance, what he's produced in some of the the challenges, like the headwear and stuff like that, it's yes, it's very entertaining, and he's got a certain aesthetic, let's just shall we say, but yeah, I think it was Marcus's time to go, but I just get so confused sometimes with the judging, just because sometimes it doesn't always make 100% sense if you're critiquing exactly that. It's like if you went for your theory test exam, you all sit there, you all take it, and if you don't get 80% and above, or whatever the mark is, if you get 76, you've all got the same questions, then you don't go through. But it doesn't seem to be translated in the same way when they're critiquing the sewing part of the show, which is a sewing show.
Certainly the feedback on social media has been that there is inconsistencies. In the past, Ailsa would definitely have gone, and other people have gone for not fulfilling the brief on that, particularly on that final challenge. So it's a shame, but good luck to Marcus. I'm sure we'll see him somewhere in the future, and he enjoys making clothes, and that's what it is. Next week, we'll have to see. I think it should sort people out next week because of the challenges that they've got. Was it 50s theme?
It's Divas Week. Divas Week next week.
Divas Week. I saw the fringe dresses and I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting next week. We'll see what people produce. What I can say is thank you so much, Nigel, because it's great. We have had people who are expert sewers on here, but it's always great to have, because it's an entertainment show, to have somebody else's take. I know you've been in the craft industry for so long, and you obviously, you know things that need to be done in the sewing world. But it is great to have your take on that. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure. I mean, I love the Sewing Bee. I love watching it. Have done since the beginning. It's always that show that year after year I think, oh, I should get a sewing machine, and I should start working with all that fabulous fabric that you guys have bought, and many more over the years. But yeah, it's a great show. I am going to say I hope Luke wins. I would not be upset if Susie wins. I think Pasha will win. Or Alex, but there you go. We shall see. But then Elsa, whoever wins, they're all nice people.
I'd like to see Luke win. I'd like to see a man win for a change, because
I think it would be lovely. I mean, obviously, I love Luke because of his whole aesthetic of doing the drag and all of that as well. And I need to get him on the radio. Make that happen, people. That would be wonderful. But yes. I think he's always interesting, and with my viewer head on, because as you said, I mean, I don't really sew. I don't look at it and think like, oh, they didn't use the right foot for that, or didn't line that with the right material, whatever. So I do just look at it and think, is that pretty? Do I like it? Would I wear it? Is that interesting? Is it keeping me? Is it stopping me from scrolling on my phone while I'm watching the TV? And it does. His outfits always do. So yeah, so I would love it if Luke won. I mean, when did the guy last win? I know I can't think.
I
feel it's been a wee while.
It's been a long time.
I can't remember. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but it was. He had blonde hair and blue eyes.
I'm going to Google it while you're talking.
It's funny. I mean, there's been some fabulous male sewers on there over the years. I mean, obviously, I can't remember his name, the guy that did all the cruise ships. It was just really flamboyant and fabulous. I loved him.
He was lovely, wasn't he? Yes.
I loved him. Matthew that was on it, and Raph that was on it, and obviously Mr. Hillard, Stu from back in the day, who I now work.
It was Matt won in 2015.
Yes.
Yes, he was the Maverick.
2015, 9 years ago.
Took the title of King Bee in March 2015, and he became the first male winner of the Great British Sewing Bee. So I think, and I've just said, when was the last time a man won? So I think he was our last man to win. He was the first male.
Luke to win, and I want him to make me a sequin bomber jacket. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, thank you again, Nigel. And as always, thank you, Alistair, for lots of your hints and tips that we don't know. It's great to hear how they actually do it in the fashion industry. And next week is week 8. As you say, it's Diva week, and we've actually got Debbie Shaw, who's popping along. Wait, let's say Diva week. Well, lovely. Maybe one day we'll have to have Grace back. Grace is our diva.
I'm surrounded by the other Grace Jones here, aren't I? So it's like,
yes.
We need the other Grace Jones back.
Absolutely. If it's Diva week, we may have to put the phone call in and get Grace here.
Well, I may. Well, yes. I mean, she is. I mean, she's very, very bad. I mean, she does your cleaning. She also does Nigel Allen's cleaning as well. I mean,
she's due in a moment. Quite frankly, I've got some crevices that need sorting out, and Grace is the only one that can work them.
Well, keep your drawer is all I'm going to say, Nigel.
And put the milkman's money high up, because you know
how it works.
Anyway, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody now. Stop. So bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Bye.